Hey guys, I feel like playing my little song for a second. Let's play my little song. I just love this lullaby one here. Hold on a second. Here we go. Here we go. We're going to play this for a second. So let's do this. Okay. Hey guys. Hey Bird. Hey Princess Diana. Hey Miss Chappelle. Hey Cake Baby in the house. Hey Shay. How are you? All right, guys. I am here for. I see we lost a couple of people. I noticed the Boski just went live, so I guess a lot of you guys gonna go over there. But as promised, I am here to bring you the reading. Just trying to wait till a couple of more people get inside the room here. I know you guys say y'all wanted me to come back to continue listening to the book by Alan Dershowitz. It's called Guilt by Accusation: The Challenge of Proving Innocent in the Age of Me Too. So it has to do with what's going on right now with Robert. There's a lot of accusation, and there is people who are putting him guilty in a court of public opinion. So we're going to listen to Mr. Deteritz in his situation where he was accused by one of Epstein's victim, and it turned out that this woman lied about the whole situation, the whole case, and he had to fight for his innocence. He was guilty by accusation. Nothing was proven in a court of law, but it was based on public opinion. He lost a lot of things. His reputation was ruined because of the false accusation. Hey, Shannon. Hey, woman of God. Hey, Wish. Bird. Hello. Lovable Libra. Hello. Welcome, guys. So I am back to bring about the book, the reading. Like I said, we know this chat is not going to be full of people because they said if you want to hide anything to a group of Black people, they said to put it in a book because it said that most of us Black people do not like to read. Us people of color, not just Black, African American. That's what they basically said. That you want to hide anything, put it in a book because they will not read it. So We're not that type, are we? We're going to read. Well, we're going to listen to someone else read, but it's in the book. And we're going to discuss it. I'm going to stop on and off so we can go over some of the things that's in the book. Me too, woman of God. I love to read. I love to learn. I love to dissect things. If you know, my gift itself is I'm more of a teacher. I have a teaching spirit, I believe. Nakia's in here. Where is she? I didn't see her coming. Hey, Nakia. She's here. She's here to listen. And I thank you. It's only 18 of us in here, but 18 strong. And I love it. Here we go. We're gonna start off where we left off. We left off with him talking about how he'd never met this young lady. Okay, guys, I've been arguing with this woman on Facebook. On Terry's page. Terry is a guy that's been he started the campaign of saving R. Kelly, where this woman, he had put a thing out right here. I'm going to read to you guys what happened. He put a thing out, right, with the commercial. Hold on. With the commercial. Oh, sorry. With the commercial, right? This is Terry Robertson, if anybody want to go to his page. He put something out, and this is what he said. He says, it's a lot of questions that needs to be answered. We've been in a lot, and we've been in a lot in 2020. So there's no need to overlook this, brother. I am a believer in forgiveness and love, but for what I've gained so far, when he comes out of this, is gonna be one big ass lawsuit. This is what he said. This man has been wronged, and some even though, but media, even though, I don't know what he's mean by that, been wrong, and some even know, okay, but some even know, but media has made some of us hate him so bad. At Tyrese, at Fat Joe, it's time for God heard our conversation. God's risen. This brother needs our help. Love that world. F the brand. It's about the man, right? And, I put my little wonderful thing in there, and this woman here, this woman by the name of Nicole Wright, right? She says, R. Kelly has been known as a P. I'm not using the word because I don't like that word at all. As known as a P, and that has been proven. This is what she said. I've known of his P behavior on young girls since I was in high school. Please don't ever tag me in this post defending this R, right? So I go in and says, Nicole Wright proving with a question mark. When was it proven? Question mark. Just asking for a friend. This is just me asking. Then she says, Sylvia P. In the porn tape that was released 20 years ago, it was obvious that girl was a teenager. Also, it is public record that he married Aaliyah when she was 15. What proof do you need? What more proof do you need? Marrying children should be suffice proof. And then I said, Nicole Wright, I don't watch porn, but if it was a child, I definitely wouldn't watch it. You watched it? Question mark. Just curious. A few interviews, Aaliyah says she was never married. In a court of law, he is innocent until proven guilty. You are so angry? Question mark. Then Tony goes in and say, Nicole, P is a sex with someone under 13 and definition through the law. What 13-year-old did Kel sleep with? You people shake my head. That's what he said. So then he put in R. Kelly's Innocence webpage and everything, right? So she comes back to me. Hold on, y'all. Sorry about that. So then she comes back to me and says the tape that came out was him with different women, and then the teenager was at the end. My husband at the time actually destroyed the DVD because he was disgusted by what he saw. Why would Aaliyah admit in an interview that she was taken advantage by a predator? No. The marriage to Aaliyah was proven over 2 decades ago. I'm not angry. I'm just defending. I just don't defend a P, right? Then she goes in onto Tony and says, "You people, nah, no necker. I don't understand what she's saying. Defend the P because you like the music." Then she says, "F. R. Kelly. I said what I said." She's a very angry woman. So I'm gonna leave her alone. But I was like going back and forth with this lady, and she hasn't proved anything to me. So be gone with her. But that's why I brought up this topic of what we're reading right now, is because people are making people guilty based on public opinion and not by what the law says and what has been proven. So this is why we're in this book right now, so we can understand some of the shenanigans that goes on behind the scenes of how people pay off different people just to get their agenda through. You know, this Me Too movement is really, really dangerous at the end, you know? So, all right, we're going to go into this book right now. Y'all ready? Hey, Money Gang. Hey, woman of God. I think I said, hey, Healer World. I was looking for you, Healer Land. Hey, Boss Lady. Okay, I think I said hi to everybody. Money Gang, I said hi to you already, Shay. Okay, let's see. Anybody else? Anybody else? I was just sharing with them how, hey, Princess Diana. Nikia, of course, we talked already. Hey, Wish. How this person was going back and forth with me, and she still has not proven anything. Hey, K baby. So, all right, y'all ready, guys? You ready? Ready? Get your listening ears on. Get your water, your mug, your hot cocoa. Get your blanket, and ready for this book. You ready? You ready, guys? Give me thumbs up if you're ready. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready. Ready? And this. All right, you ready? Okay.
I write as well for readers in future generations who may be more interested in truth than some in the Me Too generation seem to be. I write for my children, my grandchildren, and their children. And I write to establish the historical and evidentiary record of my innocence. Eventually, the pendulum will swing back to truth. And when it does, the documentation of my innocence will be available to those who care about what actually happened and didn't happen. Some friends and relatives have urged me not to write this book because it will only continue the focus on the false accusation against me. They argue quite persuasively that the less attention paid to the accusation, the more likely the story will go away. But it's not my goal to make the story go away. My goal is to disprove it categorically and definitively until there is no lingering doubt in the minds of all fair and open-minded people. They also argue that it's a fool's errand to try to prove a negative, namely that I did not have sex with my accuser. It is, to be sure, a daunting challenge, but I accept it. If Gouffre had falsely accused me of having sex with her once in New York, it would have been well nigh impossible to disprove that accusation conclusively, even though it's untrue. But she foolishly accused me of having sex with her 7 times in places her lawyers admitted. It would have been impossible for me to have been during the relevant time period. That, combined with her own implicit admissions in emails and manuscripts, have made it possible for me to prove the negative. Others have argued that my persistent claims of total innocence make me sound guilty. But if I remain silent or simply issued a rote denial, some would say that my refusal to defend myself makes me sound guilty. It's a no-win situation in the age of Me Too. So I will continue to assert and prove my innocence, regardless of what some will say. All victims should speak out. Victims of sexual abuse as well as victims of false accusations of sexual abuse. Finally, some have criticized me for calling my false accusers liars and perjurers, claiming that I'm trying to silence victims of abuse. But it is my false accusers and their allies who have been trying to silence me by calling me a pedophile and then saying that accused pedophiles should not have access to the media. They are also trying to silence me by threatening to sue and actually suing me for defamation if I defend myself against their false accusations in the court of public opinion. To paraphrase Adlai Stevenson, if my accusers stop lying about me, I will stop telling the truth about them. Hence, this book. Chapter 1, How I Met Jeffrey Epstein. I had never heard of Jeffrey Epstein when Lynn Forrester, a prominent and wealthy woman who soon thereafter married Sir Evelyn Rothschild and became the Lady de Rothschild, called and asked me to meet her dear friend. I was on Martha's Vineyard with my family and I was reluctant to have a guest, but Lynn implored me, saying it would be a great favor to her and that I would enjoy meeting this wonderful and brilliant man. She told me that he was interested in science and law, close to the president and provost of Harvard, and a good person. He and his friend Leslie Wexner had contributed a large sum of money to build the Hillel House at Harvard in honor of Harvard's provost, Henry Rosofsky. Epstein was flying to the Vineyard to visit Lynn that day, and she wanted to bring him over for a brief introduction. Lynn dropped him off at my house, and he met my wife and children. We talked about science and his interest in funding some research at Harvard on evolutionary biology. I told him that I had taught a course with Stephen Jay Gould, a world-famous paleontologist and evolutionary theorist, and he asked me to introduce him to Steve. Rothschild herself is a lawyer, had many prominent friends, including David Boies, about whom much later. She introduced many in her social circle to Epstein, including, she boasted, President Bill Clinton. She vouched for Epstein and became his calling card to people on the Vineyard in New York and Palm Beach and elsewhere. Rothschild had a long-term personal relationship with Epstein that ended in a financial dispute amidst mutual recriminations over a townhouse she sold him for a friend. Turned out it was Ghislaine Maxwell. Rothschild then told me that Epstein was, quote, untrustworthy. Epstein said the same thing about Rothschild, but she did not tell me anything about his personal life. Meeting Epstein was just about the worst thing that ever happened to me. I wish I had never laid eyes on him. I take full responsibility for becoming his acquaintance and lawyer, but I wish Rothschild had never asked me to meet him in the first place. Shortly after our brief time together on the Vineyard, Epstein invited me to attend Leslie Wexner's 59th birthday dinner in New Albany, Ohio, a suburb of Columbus, where Wexner had a mansion and several small houses on his property, including one owned by Epstein. He told me that Wexner, who was worth several $1 billion, did not want any material gifts for his birthday, but asked Epstein to bring the most interesting man he had met that year. Epstein said that he had told Wexner about me, and Wexner wanted to meet me. I flew to New Albany on Epstein's private jet, along with Senator and former astronaut John Glenn, who was also a guest at the dinner party. The other guests included the former Prime Minister and soon-to-be President of Israel, Shimon Peres, as well as A. Alfred Tubman, the CEO of Sotheby's Auction House. The all-male dinner was an intellectual as well as gastronomical feast. We discussed science, art, politics, and Israel. Shortly after this, Lynn Forrester gave a birthday party for Rothschild on Martha's Vineyard. Epstein was there, and so was Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. Forrester introduced Epstein to all the fancy people in attendance and sang his praises. At the dinner, Prince Andrew expressed an interest in attending my classes at Harvard, and I invited him to sit in on my first-year criminal law course. We were discussing the Second Amendment, and he raised his hand to make a point based on his own military experience with weapons. The dean then organized a faculty lunch in his honor. Several days later, he wrote me a letter of appreciation that included the following. Dear Alan, thank you for a most intellectual experience. It was a fascinating insight into the law and the very serious subjects and dilemmas you face. The opportunity to be a student for just one lecture was an expanding experience, and I cannot begin to thank you enough for your kindness. Thanks must also be made for the fascinating tour of the law school library and the wonderful lunch with some of the faculty of Harvard. I was tempted to remain and enroll for a few other courses after the discussion at lunch. I look forward to continuing my intellectual challenge with you and Jeffrey E. in the coming months. Thank you again for a fantastic experience. Yours sincerely, Andrew. The letter is dated 30 September 1999, a year before Gouffre met Epstein. I then saw Epstein from time to time when he came to Harvard to meet with several faculty members and administrators to discuss academic issues. He introduced me to some Harvard professors who I had never met, despite having been on the same faculty for many years. Eventually, Epstein established an office in Harvard Square, where he invited faculty members from Harvard and MIT to participate in lunch and seminars, which I enjoyed immensely. Epstein and I established an academic acquaintance, but never a close personal friendship. We never went out together socially. We didn't discuss our families. I never met his mother or brother or knew anything about them. Our relationship, one can call it a kind of friendship akin to that which I had with other professional colleagues, centered around academic matters. He was interested in my writing, and I sent him drafts of several books. His comments and critiques were insightful and interesting, and I thanked him in my acknowledgments. He had street smarts, and I enjoyed discussing my work with him. We never discussed his work, which remains something of a mystery beyond his money management for Leslie Wexner. I attended several academic events at his home in New York and was invited, along with my nephew, to the launch of a space shuttle from the Kennedy Space Center. I never saw him in the presence of underage females or even anyone close to underage. While attending events in his home in New York, including one large party with Vera Wang, Amy Tan, and with other writers, artists, and intellectuals, he introduced me and my wife to several of his women friends who were in their late 20s and early 30s. My wife didn't like Epstein's values, and especially his attitude toward women, but neither of us suspected that he had a penchant for teenagers. He kept that aspect of his private life completely separate from his academic friends. In the late 1990s, my wife, daughter, and I were vacationing in the Caribbean, and Epstein invited us to see the island he had recently bought. We spent a day there dining with Professor Michael Porter of the Harvard Business School, his then wife, and their relatives. The island was empty except for some staff and Epstein's erstwhile girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. While Epstein was working in his office, my wife had a massage from a professional masseuse therapist, and my daughter and I explored the island. This was the only visit to Epstein's island, and it was well before he ever met Virginia Roberts Giuffre. In an interview shortly after first being accused by Giuffre, I volunteered that I too had had a massage from a professional therapist. Years later, the media tried to make a big deal of that, suggesting that I had admitted something devious. My massage by a middle-aged woman of Russian background had taken place well before Giuffre met Epstein, and nearly a decade before anyone accused him of any improprieties. Epstein's house manager submitted a sworn affidavit in which he confirmed that my massage was by a professional therapist named Olga, who was in her 40s, and yes, I did keep my shorts on. My family stayed in Epstein's Palm Beach home for several days in 2005 when my granddaughter participated in a soccer tournament close by. Epstein was not there, and the house was vacant except for the couple who took care of the house and prepared meals. I also stayed in his Palm Beach house when subsequently representing him and negotiating with the state attorney of Palm Beach County. That was years after Giuffre separated from Epstein and moved to Australia. I flew in a small jet on several occasions on academic and legal business. The airplane manifest showed that I was never on the plane with Giuffre or any underage females. I never heard the term Lolita Express used to describe the large jet he bought years later, until I read about it in the press after he pleaded guilty. Nor had I heard the term pedophile or orgy island until after I began to represent Epstein. The island was called Little St. James, or jokingly, Little St. Jeff. Epstein gave his guests sweatshirts with Little St. Jeff printed on them. In none of these settings did I ever see an underage female or even anyone close to underage, nor did I ever see any photographs of nude or semi-nude women or any sex toys. There were no clues that anything inappropriate had taken place in any of Epstein's homes. If there had been, I never would have allowed my children or grandchildren to have spent time there, nor would the dozens of academics, journalists, business people, political figures who frequented his homes have remained silent. Epstein may have had inappropriate photographs and sex toys in his private bedroom area, but that was closed off to his prominent visitors, whom he was trying to impress with his academic and other connections. My infrequent visit to Epstein's homes were no different from my visits to the homes of other academics and professional colleagues and friends whose private areas I did not enter and into whose private lives I did not inquire. As soon as Epstein was accused of sexual misconduct, my relationship with him changed completely. He asked me to become one of his lawyers to help assemble a legal team, which I did. My relationship with him then became entirely professional. I billed him for every hour we spent together. Like many other lawyer-client relationships, ours was tense and sometimes acrimonious. Nothing I did was good enough. He argued over my bills and whether I was prioritizing his case. Even the plea agreement we eventually struck, which the media labeled a sweetheart deal, did not satisfy him. You should have done better, he complained. The deal itself had been widely mischaracterized by the media. Prosecutors had a strong state case against Epstein. There was credible evidence that he had improper sexual contact with local underage girls whom he paid in cash. His claim that the few underage girls had presented fake IDs was irrelevant under the law. But that would not become a federal crime unless there was an interstate nexus, credible evidence that he had transported these girls across state lines or used interstate communication facilities for an improper purpose. Federal prosecutors could not prove these essential elements, so they agreed to a deal under which Epstein would plead guilty to a state crime, serve 18 months in jail, register as a sex offender, and compensate all of his victims. The plea bargain represented the comparative strengths and weaknesses of each side. They had a strong state case, but a weak federal one. We had a strong defense to a federal prosecution, but not to a state charge. Epstein pleaded guilty, served time in jail, registered as a sex offender, and compensated his victims. My relationship with them then ended, except for an occasional phone call about the plea bargain. I was not aware of any personal activities after the plea bargain was finalized and implemented. Let me be categorical and crystal clear and repeat here what I've stated under oath and subject to pain of perjury. During my changing relationships with Epstein, from academic acquaintance and colleague to lawyer to former lawyer, I never saw or did anything even remotely improper.
Okay, y'all heard that, right? You heard some of the things that that happened in regards to his relationship with Epstein. When he first met Epstein, he never ever had never even witnessed any kind of impropriety, any kind of underage girls around him and things like that. He basically said that Epstein kept everything separate. And even his family had visited Epstein place while Epstein was not there. So what happened is Virginia Robert Defray accused him of having sex with him more than one, but 7 times. But he has never, ever met this woman. But she has accused him of having sex with her, in fact, raping her as an underage girl. So that is what he is basically. This book is all about how the process and what he had to go through in trying to prove himself innocent, because in the court of a public opinion, they viewed him as being guilty. So that's what we're listening to. Those who have come in late, we're listening to Guilt by Accusation by Alan Dershowitz. He was the attorney, one of the attorneys for Jeffrey Epstein. And I'm going to continue. We're at chapter 1, and he's just gave us a little introduction of when he met him, how he met him, and what happened during his initial meeting, and him representing him, as well as the end of their relationship as lawyer and client. Okay, here we go.
Chapter 2, You've Been Accused. On the day before the 2015 New Year, I received a phone call from a journalist who said, "You've been accused of having sex with an underage girl. What do you have to say?" I was shocked. I knew the accusation was false because I had never had sex with an underage person or with anyone other than my wife during the relevant time period. Who? When? Where? I asked. The journalist told me that the woman's name was Virginia Roberts Gouffre, who was then 32 years old. She claimed I had had sex with her 16 years earlier when she was 16 and being trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. The woman who accused me was not among the alleged victims at the time of the plea bargain, but she was trying to join a lawsuit.
Okay, so she was not among the victims of Epstein. She tried to join the class action afterwards, but she's the one who accused Alan Dershowitz of having sex with her, which was absolutely false because he actually never met the woman. But he is accused. Hey, Lavelle. Hey, Elizabeth Shay, Champel. I think we spoke to everybody already. But he now where this news people called him and told him that he was accused. And remember, the case occurred in 2015. That's when the initial case was in 2002. But on 2015 is when he gets the call stating that he's been accused of by this 32-year-old woman who said he had sex with her at age 15, if I'm not mistaken. All right, here we go. Sorry, my phone. Okay.
Stated goal was to undo Epstein's plea agreements so that she could sue him for a lot of money. As previously mentioned, I had been one of Epstein's lawyers, together with Kenneth Starr, Roy Black, and others, who had arranged a plea bargain, 2 counts of solicitation and procuring. It was a controversial end to a highly publicized case, and many people were furious that the alleged predator received so light a sentence. Among those who were very upset were some of his alleged victims who were not notified in advance of the plea bargain. I never met any of the alleged victims and knew nothing of the woman who was accusing me. It was an absurd accusation, and neither I nor my wife took it seriously. I joked that I had never had sex with an underage female, even when I was an underage male. My first marriage was when I was an inexperienced 20-and-a-half-year-old to my first serious girlfriend, whom I had met at Jewish summer camp when I was 16 and a half years old. And in those days, there was no premarital anything among Orthodox Jews. A marriage license, unlike a driver's license, was not preceded by a learner's permit. But within hours of learning of the false accusation, my phone began to ring and my inbox began to fill up because I had been accused, along with Prince Andrew, in a court filing which was leaked to the media. The story was being reported around the world, and although I generally received second billing to the prince, my name and that of Harvard were featured in many of the stories, generally in the headline. My accuser initially insisted on anonymity in the lawsuit, even though she had given an interview in 2011 to a British tabloid, the Daily Mail, for which she was paid $160,000. In that article, in which she mentioned Prince Andrew and others, but not me, she had agreed to be named. Consequently, the media quickly identified her, and I was told her name and shown a photograph. But neither was at all familiar to me. I was sure I had never met her. I certainly had never had sex with her. Giuffre never provided evidence beyond her own inconsistent words in support of her allegations, nor did she give dates, even months, seasons, or years when she claimed to have had sex with me. She and her lawyers simply threw my name into a court pleading in a case in which I was not a party. It was as if she scribbled my name on a bathroom wall, except that by including it in a court filing, she sought to obtain immunity from being sued for defamation. Also, by filing it in court, she gave immunity to the media to publish it without doing any investigation, even if they didn't believe it was true, which several reporters told me they did not. The mere filing of a document made it newsworthy and protected it from defamation lawsuits. She could, of course, have filed the accusation under seal, as she did regarding the numerous other people she accused, many of them prominent political and financial figures. But, as I would later learn from Giuffre's best friend, the decision to accuse me in public, while accusing others in private, was part of a carefully calculated shakedown plot to get money from a wealthy individual who was not publicly named, at least not yet. As soon as I learned of the false accusation, I agreed to respond to interview requests from major media around the world. I categorically asserted not only my complete innocence, but also the physical impossibility of the allegations leveled against me. I had incontrovertible documentary evidence proving that during the relevant time period, I could not have been anywhere near 4 of the 5 locations where my false accuser said she had sexual relations with me. These included the private Caribbean island, a New Mexico ranch, a Palm Beach mansion, and a private jet all owned by Epstein. The 5th was New York, which tens of millions of people, including me, passed through. I produced the evidence, travel, cell phone, credit cards, and other records that accounted for my whereabouts every single day of the 2 years during which this woman claimed she was being trafficked as a sex slave. A few days later, the Wall Street Journal published an op-ed entitled "A Nightmare of False Accusation That Could Happen to You," in which I wrote about the legal predicament I found myself in and about the gaping hole in our legal system that permits unscrupulous individuals to make false accusations without any legal or pecuniary consequences. I agreed to waive the criminal statute of limitations by submitting a sworn affidavit that, if false, would subject me to a current perjury prosecution, despite the accusations being well beyond the statute of limitations. I challenged my accuser to produce any photographs or other physical evidence substantiating her account, which I knew could not possibly exist. I also demanded that she and her lawyers repeat the accusations on TV so I could sue them. Of course, they did not. I called my false accuser a liar and a perjurer, not only in court papers, but in media interviews, knowing that this exposed me to the risk of expensive and risky defamation suits by her. In short, I did everything I would never allow any of my own clients to do because most of my own clients have had something to hide. I've represented hundreds of individuals who have been accused of crimes ranging from mass murder to inside trading. Rarely have I known for certain whether they were guilty, innocent, or somewhere in between. In my first book, written for a general audience, The Best Defense, published in 1982, I acknowledged that most of the criminal defendants I've represented have probably been guilty, because in the United States, the majority of people charged with crime are in fact guilty, and thank goodness for that. No one would want to live in a country like Iran or China, where a large number of innocent people are brought to trial. Although absolutely innocent people are sometimes charged with serious crimes, criminal justice systems that operate under the rule of law pride themselves on that happening quite rarely. So when I take a criminal case, I begin with a presumption of guilt. I assume my client probably did it, though I hope I'm wrong, and sometimes I am. Generally, it's much safer for a criminal defense lawyer to presume guilt rather than innocence as a beginning hypothesis. If I were to presume my client's innocence, I might make the mistake of allowing them to be questioned by the police. I might have them consent to a search of their home or computer, or I might allow them to go on TV.
That is interesting, y'all. Okay, did you hear what he just said? Whenever he takes on a case, he presumes that his clients are guilty. So I understand why he's just said that, because he gave an explanation. Because if he came in thinking his clients are innocent, he would allow police to do searches and things like that. And there might be a possibility of them finding or even planting something there, and it would cause some problem with his defense. So that's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. What do you guys think about that? How he takes on the case already. Hey, Tari, I think it's a Tyree. Yeah. What do you guys think about that? How he comes in with the mindset of his clients being guilty, and then his movement would be towards as if a person is guilty. What do you think about that? You guys are not answering the question. Hello, are you guys sleeping? I see people moving out the chat, leaving because I started asking questions. You know I was going to ask you questions. Okay, yeah, I don't want to answer the question. Okay, I'll continue playing. It sounds like a double-edged sword. Exactly, Elizabeth. It does sound like that. All right, you ready? And I think he does it for precaution measures, because he wouldn't let anybody come into his client's home and search. Okay, here we go.
Assert their innocence and lock in their account, which may turn out to be provably false. If I were ever to have a case, it which I knew for certain that my client was innocent, say I had a video of my client being on a different continent at the time of the crime, I might well waive his rights and encourage the police to question and search him. I might encourage him to go on TV, assert his innocence, tell his story, and even show the video. After all, if the client is innocent, what does he have to hide? Why have the client look guilty by refusing to answer questions? Well, I was that client. Having nothing to hide, I did what I would never allow a client of whose innocence I was not absolutely certain to do. I went on TV, asserted my innocence, provided my evidence, waived the criminal statute of limitations, and answered all questions. I did it because I was my only client about whose absolute innocence there was no doubt. So I was prepared to break all of the rules and the rules by which other good defense attorneys operate when they represent accused persons of whose innocence they can never be absolutely certain. My candor and openness succeeded, at least initially. The lawyers who filed the false accusation withdrew it and publicly acknowledged that it was a mistake to have filed sexual misconduct allegations against me. An independent investigation by the former director of the FBI and former federal judge Louis Freeh concluded that there was, quote, no evidence to support the accusations of sexual misconduct against me, and in several instances the evidence directly contradicted the accusation made against me, and that the totality of the evidence found during the investigation refutes the allegations made against me. An investigation by James Patterson and 2 investigative reporters found, quote, nothing other than accusations in terms of Dershowitz. One of the lawyers who filed papers accusing me of having sex with Gouffre and other underage females, a former federal judge and now a University of Utah law professor, Paul Cassell, acknowledged during a sworn deposition that he did not have the names of any such females and had not spoken to any. In fact, he was not able to offer any actual evidence, because there was none, to corroborate his outrageous accusation. This is what he swore under oath when asked to name one of the other underage females with whom he said I may have had sex. Quote, I have 24 names in mind as possible sexual abuse victims that Dershowitz may or may not have abused, and I have not been able to pinpoint exactly what happened, end quote. He said that he got the names from a police report that referred to Jeffrey Epstein but did not mention me. It was a clear example of guilt by association between a client and his lawyer. The worst part was that this McCarthyite statement was not made by an ordinary lawyer, but rather by a distinguished professor and former judge who lent his impeccable professional credentials to bolster the false accusations. Because he made it in a cowardly fashion behind the litigation privilege in a court proceeding, I couldn't sue him for defamation. He knew that if he made it outside of court, I would have sued him and won a large judgment. I challenged him then, and I invite him now, to repeat his false and defamatory accusation outside of court. He won't. I also invite the Utah Bar Association to investigate his outrageous and unfounded accusation. They won't. Not surprisingly, the federal judge before whom the false accusation was filed expressed outrage and struck them from the record as a sanction against the lawyers and reminded the lawyers of their ethical obligations under court rules not to include irrelevant and impertinent accusations in court documents. But this positive result took many months and many dollars in legal fees and considerable aggravation. It left lingering scars on my health and my reputation. It should never have happened, and it wouldn't have had the lawyers representing Gouffre been more responsible and had the legal system not been unfairly skewed in favor of protecting those who level false accusations from behind the litigation privilege. I am telling this story now so that the law may be reformed to protect innocent people from being falsely accused in the future. I am a victim of a false accusation, and I believe that victims must speak out against the injustices they suffered. The Me Too movement has commendably forced into public view the rampant exploitation of vulnerable women by predatory men. Women who have been victims of sexual abuse must be encouraged to expose their abuses. But men who have been falsely accused, especially those like me, who were deliberately targeted for crass financial gain, must also be encouraged to expose their false accusers. I will continue to speak out against anyone who has falsely accused me, despite the difficulty of proving one's innocence in the age of Me Too. I will fight the current sexual McCarthyism of lawyers like Paul Cassell as strongly as I fought the political McCarthyism of my youth. Chapter 3, David Boies and his firm create a conflict of interest. When I was first accused, one of David Boies' partners offered to represent me in my efforts to defend myself against the false charges leveled by Gouffre. I was not aware at the time that Boies had been representing Gouffre for several months before her accusation. It's a strange story indeed, and one that raises important issues of legal ethics. It began for me on January 22nd, 2015, when I appeared on the Today Show on NBC, ironically interviewed by Matt Lauer, who 3 years later was fired by NBC for inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace, and said the following: I've never seen her. I've never met her. She is categorically lying and making the whole thing up. I am afraid of nothing. I am hiding nothing. She is afraid of revealing this in public. She is afraid of going into dates and specifics. I have been absolutely upfront in answering every question. Later that day, I received an email from one of Boies' partners, Carlos Sayers, with whom I had worked on a case several years previously, along with another partner at the Boies, Schiller, and Flexner firm in Fort Lauderdale named Sigrid McCauley. Sayers said, "If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know." Obviously, I didn't know that his firm was already representing the woman who had falsely accused me. Indeed, the partner, who along with Boies was the key lawyer for Gouffre, was Sigrid McCauley herself. I have no idea whether Sayers knew that his partner and friend was representing Gouffre when he offered to represent me. I doubt it, since he told me on the phone call that he didn't believe the accusations against me, and he thought the lawyers who had leveled them had acted improperly. One of those lawyers, it turns out, was David Boies, his senior partner. Sayers told me that he would have to check with the managing partner of the law firm before he could agree to represent me. That is common because lawyers have to check to see that there is no conflict of interest between clients they and their firm are representing. No conflict could be clearer than representing both the accuser and the accused without informing the accused. Later that evening, Sayers sent me an email saying that he had checked with the managing partner, Stuart Singer, and that, quote, "Stuart and I think we can provide help, and that Stuart and I look forward to working with you on this." Sayers also encouraged me to send written material relevant to the lawsuit that had been filed against me by Gouffre's lawyers. Based on my reasonable assumption that they had done a conflict check and that there was no conflict of interest in representing me, I responded to Sayers' request and sent him material that would be necessary to familiarize him with the case. Among the documents he received was my detailed and highly confidential lawyer-client memorandum, which described the strategy I intended to pursue, including a tactical step calculated to cause my opponents to fall into a legal trap. Sayers received, read, and commented on this highly confidential memorandum and sent me some additional material that he said might bolster my position. As far as I was concerned, Sayers and the Boies law firm were my lawyers with whom I could share important information that would be kept secret from my legal opponents. If I had known that the Boies firm was my legal opponent, that they were representing the very woman who had falsely accused me, I would certainly not have trusted them with my legal secrets. Imagine my shock when I learned the truth. At first, a member of the law firm told me that because Jonathan Schiller, one of the firm's named partners, was serving as chair of the board of Columbia University, the firm was precluded from representing academics. That phony cover story didn't even pass the giggle test. I knew that wasn't the real reason, but had no idea what it was. When I found out the real reason, that they had long been representing my false accuser, I was furious with Boies, who was the responsible named partner. David and I had always been on good terms, and I still find it hard to believe that two senior partners in his firm, including the managing partner in the Fort Lauderdale office, were offering to represent a well-known lawyer with whom Boies had a friendly relationship without being aware of the fact that he was representing my accuser. In fact, when Sayers told me he had a check before agreeing to represent me, I told him that Boies and I were friends and offered to call him. Sayers said that was not necessary and that he would check with the managing partner in Florida. It is even more suspicious that McCauley, who was a partner in the same office as Sayers, wouldn't know of his offer to represent me. She must have known that Boyes was representing my accuser. I have since learned that the Boyes, Schiller, and Flexner firm has been sanctioned many times for conflicts of interest. In 2013, for example, a judge for the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York ordered the Boyes firm to pay their opponent's legal fees on the grounds that, quote, a clearer conflict of interest cannot be imagined. A first-year law student on day one of an ethics class should be able to spot a conflict. But this law firm, which holds itself out as one of the country's preeminent law firms, did not, end quote. David Boyes himself has been involved in a number of conflicts of interest situations. In 2005, Boyes failed to disclose personal ties to 3 document companies to whom he had referred several clients. More recently, the media reported that Boyes was at the center of a conflict of interest involving his ethically incompatible roles as both a board member and lawyer for the fraudulent blood testing company Theranos. Also recently, Boyes was representing the New York Times. At the same time, he was representing Harvey Weinstein and was involved in hiring investigators that were targeting the Times reporter in an effort to kill the stories they were writing about Weinstein. The Times publicly fired Boyes, calling his conflict of interest a great betrayal. Had I known the Boyes firm's sordid history when they offered to represent me, I would have been more suspicious and more cautious. When I complained about this conflict of interest, Boyes suggested that we talk. When we met in early 2015, he told me he didn't know that Gouffre would be accusing me of sexual misconduct when he agreed to represent her. He said that he would never have agreed to represent her if he had any idea that she would be accusing me. He also said that the lawyers who had included her allegations against me in the federal court filing were wrong to do that and had a problem. He agreed to review my travel records, and if they supported my claims, he promised to try to persuade Gouffre that she had made a terrible mistake in identifying me as one of the men with whom she had sex. During 2015, Boyes and I met several times in person in New York, and for many hours reviewing the evidence. We spoke on the phone more than a dozen times. After reviewing my travel and other records, he acknowledged it would have been, quote, impossible for me to have been at the various locations in which his client claimed to have had sex with me during the entire 2-year period during which Gouffre knew Epstein. Gouffre refused to be specific about times within that period, especially after she learned that I had detailed records of my whereabouts. The records proved conclusively that I had never set foot on Epstein's Island Ranch, Palm Beach home airplane during the 2 years Gouffre claimed to have been having sex with me in those places. I, of course, had been in New York, but Boyes assured me this was irrelevant because everyone passes through New York, and since it was clear I could not have been in the other locations which Gouffre had accused me with great specificity, Boyes and his partner Macaulay spent hours with me and my paralegal on 2 separate occasions reviewing the records. I memorialized what he told me in contemporaneous notes, quoting his exact language. In the presence of several other lawyers, Boyes repeatedly stated that he was convinced that I could not have been at the locations during the relevant time period. Here is what he said, quote, it looks to me like this set of dates would make it impossible for you to have been on the island or at the ranch during the relevant time. He promised that unless Gouffre acknowledged that she was mistaken about me and withdrew the accusation she had made in the court papers, he would have no choice but to terminate his representation of her. He promised to arrange a meeting with Gouffre and get back to me, but he kept making excuses for not meeting with her. Once I realized Boyes would not keep his word, I recorded several conversations with him. Recording is legal in New York if one party consents. Here are his and my exact words as recorded and confirmed by law enforcement officials. Quote, Dershowitz, you're as persuaded as we are that it was not possible for me to be on the island to have sex with her in New Mexico and on the airplane in Palm Beach, but New York, you say, is a little up in the air. What is the next step at this point? Boyes, I think the next step would be for me and Sigrid, both of us together, to sit down with our client and say explicitly, 1, we know you believe you had relations with Professor Dershowitz. We have taken steps to share some of the, and then it's unclear what he says, you understand, to get an honest opinion. However, we have now reviewed the documentary evidence and we are convinced that your belief is wrong, and we would like to explore with you how you could have come to this conclusion. We have some ideas. It is not surprising to me how you could have, at your age and under the circumstances that you were under at the time, have misidentified someone, or perhaps had someone intentionally misidentify him for you. The former is more likely than the latter. But there are certainly a number of possible explanations, and I'd like to review that with you and help you try to explore how you could have come to the conclusion. One thing is clear: your conclusion is simply wrong. End of the quote. In subsequent phone calls, Boyes repeated his acknowledgement that Giuffre was wrong and that her claim is unsustainable. I filed a sworn affidavit quoting these words, but without saying I had them on tape. The New York Times reported my accusation and asked Boyes for his response. Here is what he said, quote, "I never said to him that I concluded that my client's assertions were incorrect. I didn't say that. I didn't say anything like that," end quote. Of course, that wasn't true. He had said precisely that in our recorded conversations and had lied to the New York Times. I challenged him to repeat his false denial under oath, warning him that he would be committing perjury if he did. He subsequently filed a declaration in which he said, "Much of what Mr. Dershowitz asserts in his affidavit is misleading, taken out of context, or flatly untrue, a weaselly formulation apparently calculated to avoid a perjury charge." Boyes definitely did tell me that his client was wrong when she identified me as someone.
Guys, y'all see this? Y'all hear this? It's a lot of connection. It's a lot of game. It's a lot of weird stuff. He had to protect himself by recording this because it was his word against the other guy's word. Hey, Tressie. It's really, really weird how this guy was representing the accuser, his accuser, and they did not tell him. That is the weirdest thing. Hey, woman of God. I thought I said hi to you. Hey, Star Child. Hey, Charlotte. We're listening to Guilt by Accusation. This is about Alan Dershowitz. He was accused by one of Epstein's victim. He was accused of having sex with her, not once, but 7 times. And he never met the woman. Never. So he didn't even know what she looked like. He didn't meet most of his accusers. I mean, not accusers. Most of Epstein's victim, because they did a plea bargain where he admitted he pleaded guilty and they did a plea bargain. But the thing is that they never told the victims about the agreement, and they end up opening the case, reopening the case again, and then so on and so on, and Epstein ended up killing himself. Okay, so I'm going to continue. I just want to give you guys a little bit background of what we're listening to. We're listening to Alan Dershowitz. Okay, anybody have any question before I continue? Any question? Anybody have any question? It's horrible how they were going to set them up. Yeah, exactly. If I have record to protect myself, lies, I know system is crooked. I'm just going to let's bring up Dr. Rice, for example. Remember how he was recording himself speaking with Azriel? And because remember, she was recording him for the feds. So he protected himself because, it would have been one-sided. So now you have 2 people, because he lives in a state where he could record as a one-party could record, where he doesn't have to tell that he was recording the conversation that was going on between himself, Arlai, and Azriel. So had he not done that, then you hear all these other stuff that was going on in the YouTube streets of how Dr. Rice was going to jail and all this bull, blah, blah, blah. He protected himself by recording. And I was privy enough to have the recording when I played it on my live, then all hell broke loose. You guys remember that, right? But it looks like in situations like this, you have to protect yourself by recording. You have to, because some of the stuff that these people doing is crazy. It's crazy. It's really, really crazy. You have to protect yourself now these days. So, government, if you try to have set me up, I'm going to record you. I'm going to tell you that right now, because I am in a state where I can record. This is the state of Georgia. I can record one party recording. But I just wanted to put my little 2 cents in there. But you see exactly what's happening with this lawyer. He's a lawyer, y'all. A lawyer. He's being accused of underage, having sex with an underage girl. Okay. All right, let's play this.
To whom she had had sex, and the evidence that Gouffre was wrong about me has only gotten stronger since Boyes made that admission. If Boyes had any doubts about the credibility of his client, he could have easily resolved them with one phone call. Gouffre had told the media that she had met former Vice President Al Gore and his wife Tipper on Epstein's notorious island. She described the meeting in considerable detail as early as 2011 in her $160,000 Daily Mail interview. This is what the Daily Mail reported. Quote,
wow, y'all, she got $160,000 just for an interview. $160,000 in the Daily Mail for an interview with full of lies. Woo, Lord, chow. Okay, let's play this.
Virginia disclosed that Mr. Clinton's Vice President Al Gore and his wife Tipper were also guests of Epstein on the island. And here they quote Gouffre. The Gores seemed like a beautiful couple when I met them. All I knew was that Mr. Gore was a friend of Jeffrey's and Ghislaine's. Jeffrey didn't ask me to give them a massage. There might have been a couple of other girls there on that trip, but I could never have imagined this guy would do anything wrong. I was planning to vote for him when I turned 18. I thought he was awesome, end quote. She also wrote the following in her manuscript for the book she was planning to publish. Quote, I met Al Gore and his lovely wife during one of the many weekends away in the Caribbean. I was blown away by the amount of attention Al doted on his wife. It was so sweet to watch. They were next to each other at the dinner table, gazing into one another's eyes, having an intimate conversation between them. Among the many guests visiting that night, and many of them were young, beautiful women, not once did Al's eyes stray elsewhere. To them, they were the only ones there. He was up for a presidential election that year, and he definitely had my vote. Anyone that could show that much devotion and passion toward his loved ones could have the same devotion toward running a country, or at least I thought so. He only left his wife's side to have a walk down the beach with the host of the weekend, Jeffrey, end quote. The problem is that neither Gore or his wife had ever been on Jeffrey Epstein's island. They didn't know Jeffrey Epstein. They had never met him. Gouffre had made up the entire detailed and vivid account in order to sell newspapers and a book. David Boies had represented Al Gore in the 2000 election case. Boies could easily have picked up the phone and called Gore. If he had, Gore would have told him categorically that Gouffre was not telling the truth when she described her fictional encounter with him. I specifically asked Boies to call Gore, but he said it wasn't necessary because he was already convinced she was mistaken about me and her general credibility was not at issue. But of course it was. If she deliberately lied about Gore to sell her story, she would certainly not hesitate to lie about me to obtain even more money. Having been caught lying about meeting the Gores on Epstein's island, Gouffre has compounded and updated her lie by now admitting she may be wrong about where she met them, but not about having met them somewhere with Epstein, perhaps in New York. But the Gores were never with Epstein anywhere. Moreover, Gouffre described in detail seeing Al Gore walk down the beach with Epstein on his Caribbean island. pure fantasy. Gouffre has also invented a story about having dinner with President Bill Clinton on Epstein's Island. Here is her vivid but completely invented account. Quote, I had been about 17 at the time. I flew to the Caribbean with Jeffrey, and then Ghislaine Maxwell went to pick up Bill Clinton in a huge black helicopter that Jeffrey had bought for her. She always wanted to fly, and Jeffrey paid for her to take lessons. And I remember she was very excited because she got her license around the first year we met. I used to get frightened flying with her, but Bill had the Secret Service with him, and I remember him, Clinton, talking about what a good job she did. We all dined together that night. Jeffrey was at the head of the table. Bill was at his left, and I sat across from them. Emmy Taylor, Ghislaine's blonde British assistant, sat to my right. Ghislaine was at Bill's left, and at the left of Ghislaine, there were two olive-skinned brunettes who had flown with us from New York. I had never met them. I'd say they were no older than 17, very innocent looking. The problem with that account is that Secret Service and other records prove that Clinton was never on Epstein's Island. Moreover, it's hard to imagine the Secret Service agents flying with Clinton on a helicopter piloted by a woman who had just gotten her license. Gouffre invented these false accounts, just as she invented the false accounts of meeting me. Recently, after this preposterous account was debunked, Gouffre invented a new account. She claimed that she didn't tell the reporter that she remembered Clinton telling her what a good job Maxwell did, despite those words being quoted, not paraphrased. She now says that Sharon Churcher, the journalist, misquoted her, and that it was Maxwell, not Clinton, who told her that, and Maxwell may have been lying to her. She did not correct the alleged error at the time it was published, yet another lie to add to her long list of fabrications. As previously proven, Gouffre lied about her being underage when she claimed to have been trafficked. Her own employment records and a manuscript of the book she wrote prove she had lied about being below the age of consent when she said she had sex with prominent people. She originally said she vividly remembered spending her Sweet 16 celebration with Epstein, but her employment records prove, and she now concedes, that she didn't meet Epstein until a year after she turned 16, and that she was well above the age of consent when she claims to have had sex with Epstein's friends. In her first interview about Epstein at the beginning of 2011 with the Daily Mail, the closest in time to the alleged events and before she was, quote, pressured by her lawyers, this is what she said, quote, basically, I was training to be a prostitute for him and his friends who shared his interest in young girls. After about 2 years, he started to ask me to entertain his friends. This chronology would put her close to 19, well above the age of consent, when she entertained her first clients on Epstein's Island, not 16, as she first mendaciously claimed. Gouffre's lawyers had to be aware of her history of lying when they vouched for her credibility by submitting perjured affidavits by her, falsely accusing me of sexual misconduct with her. On October 16, 2019, federal judge Loretta Preska disqualified the entire Boys law firm from representing Gouffre in her defamation suit against me on several grounds, including that Boys will be called as a witness and asked about his recorded admission that Gouffre was wrong, simply wrong in accusing me. She found that disqualification was clearly required under the law. Chapter 4, the chronology of a frame-up, the newly unsealed emails and manuscript. The recent unsealing of documentary evidence has made it clear how Gouffre's story about me evolved from never having met or having sex with me, which is the truth, into a false accusation of having sex with me in numerous places I couldn't have been during the relevant time period. We have evidence that Gouffre never accused me of having sex with her until she met her lawyers, who must have told her that she would be getting a big payday if she accused me. Her best friend, a woman named Rebecca Boylan, has said to me in a recorded statement that she, quote, never heard Gouffre mention Dershowitz as someone with whom she had had sex, and that Gouffre didn't want to include my name in the legal proceedings even after she retained her lawyers, but she, quote, felt pressured, unquote, by her lawyers to name me. During the 2-year period she was with Epstein between 2000 when she was 17 and 2002 when she was 19, She told several people that she was being paid to have sex with prominent individuals. Among the people she told was her then boyfriend, Anthony Figueroa. He too has confirmed that she never mentioned me as someone with whom she had had sex. In a sworn statement, Figueroa stated that, quote, Virginia only mentioned Alan Dershowitz as she was listing famous people who were friends of Jeffrey Epstein. I remember that during the same conversation, she listed certain famous people like President Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and Chris Tucker. Virginia described Mr. Dershowitz as, quote, O.J. Simpson's lawyer, end quote. She did not say she had ever had physical contact with him. As I have said before, she had never mentioned anything about them having sex or brought up anything like that. The first time I heard about Virginia's sexual allegations against Dershowitz were after the court filings in January 2015, when the media started to contact me for interviews, end quote. Moreover, Epstein's house manager during the relevant period of time, Juan Alessi, swore under oath that he never saw me in the presence of, quote, young girls and never saw me do, quote, anything improper. When Gouffre was interviewed by federal agents in 2013, she accused others, but not me. Moreover, there is documentary proof that the U.S. Attorney's Office did not consider me to be an accomplice to Mr. Epstein's alleged crimes. The Assistant U.S. Attorney listed the people involved in criminal activity in the Epstein matter, but I was not among them. Had there been any suspicion of any involvement on my part in sexual improprieties, prosecutors would never have permitted me to serve as Epstein's lawyer and participate in negotiating the plea bargain. The first time my name was publicly mentioned as someone to whom Gouffre was trafficked was in the legal filing of December 30th, 2014, months after Gouffre met Boys and her other lawyers, who, according to Rebecca Boylan, pressured her into including me in order to obtain money from Leslie Wexner, the billionaire owner of Victoria's Secret and other companies. We now have smoking gun documents produced in the defamation lawsuit between Gouffre and Maxwell that have been placed under seal, but have now been unsealed. Here is the story of this effort by Gouffre's lawyers to suppress the damning truth about how Gouffre came to falsely accuse me. During the defamation suit between me and Gouffre's lawyers, Brad Edwards and Paul Cassell, I subpoenaed all emails from and to Gouffre that mentioned my name. The judge ordered all such emails to be produced, but they were improperly withheld. Gouffre was then directly asked whether there were any such emails mentioning my name. With her lawyer sitting next to her, she brazenly lied under oath and swore there weren't. Well, there were, and they were dynamite. They have now been unsealed, and it's obvious why she and her lawyers failed to disclose them. The first email was in May 2011 from Gouffre to a journalist named Sharon Churcher, who was helping her sell a book. She was writing about her sexual experiences in connection with Epstein. This is what the first email said, quote, Hey, Sharon, we're drawing up a contract through her agent right now and getting busy to meet my deadline. Just one.
Okay, y'all. Doesn't this sound a little bit like Geronda Pace? Where her and Mr. Durgagas? Doesn't that sound a little bit about that? I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in a few minutes, but because, well, let's keep on with this. I was just inserting a little something for us to talk about after this part. Okay.
If you have any information on you from when you and I were doing interviews about the Jeffrey Epstein story, I wanted to put the names of some of the I meant to say pedos, that Jeffrey Epstein sent me to. With everything going on, my brain feels like mush, and it would be a great deal of help. Churcher responded with the following email, quote, Don't forget Alan Dershowitz, J.E.'s buddy and lawyer. Good name for your pitch, as he represented Klaus von Bülow and a movie.
Hello, you have just reached Infamous Sylvia. How may I help you?
Hello?
Hi.
Hey, I'm talking to you for real?
Yes, you are.
This is Louisa with this misspelled words. You see Dallas in here? I don't see Dallas. She's in here.
Miss
Hello?
Louisa?
I'm just trying to learn how to do it. I just got a phone.
Oh, okay.
That way.
Okay.
I can't believe I'm talking to you. I'm an R. Kelly fan. And every time he come to Birmingham, I go see him.
Awesome.
No
Awesome.
problem, but when I first heard about it, my spirit already told me he was going to be all right, but maybe God needed some time to sit him. Sometimes he has to sit us down.
Yes.
I went to church today, and my boyfriend, well, I was too old to say boyfriend, but we broke up, and I didn't see it coming. He met the girl, and they finna get married. So I thank God for your channel and prima donna. But can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Why did y'all go over there to Nick at night? It's hard for me to get into her because she really ain't put her spin on what she thinks, but she thinks she's supposed to pay for something. But if that's the case, all of us gonna pay for something.
Well, I'm not on Nick at Night. I don't go.
One time you and not Dunn, but Gucci went over there.
Me?
Yeah.
It must have been a while back.
Huh?
It must have been a while back I went over
Yeah,
there.
it must have been a while. I'm telling you, I'm just getting on here. So that, and I think y'all calling in, and she put y'all on hold, but she still ain't gave her to.
Oh, yeah, I remember that call. Yeah, I remember that call.
I really, don't know. I'm just getting with because I'm not on Facebook. I got to get one of my nieces or something to put me on Facebook. This is me, Louisa. Can I have a ranch? So they can't think I'm a troll. I'm on this thing where I tell my cousin. I said, when the baby told me, Louisa, I don't know what you doing. I can't understand. Then you did. I said, and she blocked me.
Okay, Louisa, you can have a wrench.
To Atlanta to go get some tennis shoes at the thing, but we didn't make it sad. But I'm glad you took my call. Can I have a wrench?
Of course you can have a wrench. I'm live now.
Make sure you, for us who ride on the small bus, when it's time for G Gucci to put up some nice, like he said, he stayed in the Homewood suite. I like Homewood suite of the Eminent suite because I'm gonna try my best to be out there for his trial. But I don't think it's gonna happen and AB gonna be lit because I'm stuck on 3.
Okay.
I'm stuck on the number 3.
Number 3?
And he be going in his 3rd year because this COVID getting bad and my friend said it's gonna last up into April.
Yeah.
But she always be in. I tell her, the air you just smell different. Now I don't know, but she goes in the hospital 2 times a year. Yeah, but thank you.
You're welcome. But I am live right now. We're doing the our book club of reading the book.
I can't talk. No, don't do me like that.
Yeah, but I'm online right now, so come on in and I'll give you a wrench.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one, okay?
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for calling.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
You tell my pastor told me to read Psalms 126.
126. Okay, I'll put that in my letter to him.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye. Sorry, guys. God's Got Kills. Yes, this is still the book reading, and we're still reading Alan Dershowitz book. We're about to stop. We're going to do one more chapter, and then we're going to stop. I'm going to just have a conversation, okay? Okay, that was Miss Louise Petty, y'all.
It was made of that case, title reversal of fortune. We all suspect Alan is a pedo, and though no proof of that, you probably met him when he was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. Gouffre's response did not dispute Church's no proof statement. All she said was, "Thanks again, I'm bringing down the house with this book." Gouffre then followed Church's advice and put me in her manuscript. But, and here is the key, she put me in the manuscript to someone with whom she did not have sex. This is significant because in the same manuscript, she included detailed descriptions of people with whom she said she did have sex. These men included powerful Senator George Mitchell, Alexandra Cousteau, the granddaughter of Jacques Cousteau, Glenn and Eva, Ron Appinger, and a professor named Stephen. His last name has been redacted from the unsealed material, but we know who he is. This is how Gouffre described her encounter with Stephen as her second client. Quote, 2 weeks later, as if Jeffrey was trying to lighten my spirits, he told me I would be going to his island to meet a new client. He is a Harvard professor named Stephen, name redacted. I would be spending 2 days with him, showing him around the island, dining with him, and treating him to a massage whenever he wanted. Without Jeffrey even verbalizing the need to have sex with him, he told me to keep him happy like I had my first client. Stephen was a quirky little man with white hair and a mad scientist look about him. We made our acquaintance, and he looked as if he were tripping all over himself with words, obviously delighted with his company and location for the weekend. I showed him around as Jeffrey had asked and took him on an adventure quad bike ride around the small curvy paths, leading the way and letting loose my hair, doing something that gave me a natural high instead of the prescription one. The sights alone were breathtaking. From the mountainous peaks of the untouched parts of the island, we sat at a cliff and just sat there, not saying a word to each other, besides to compliment the sights, Mother Nature, that appealed to us. I didn't feel as if I owed the stranger anything but what was expected of me by Jeffrey, and I could be polite. I just couldn't be myself. We both met at 6 p.m. for dinner on the outside veranda. We both drank the red wine supplied on the table, and it seemed to warm me up on the breezy night. By the time dinner was served and another red wine bottle later, he seemed to get funnier. I made fun of his tousled hair, and he poked me for my skinny legs, calling me a wannabe anorexic. When dessert was brought out, he asked if he could receive one of those delightful massages he had been hearing about from Jeffrey. I gulped more red wine down and sweetly complied with his offer, dreading the moment I'd have to see his naked body, let alone touch it. I asked the housekeeper, Kathy, that had been serving us that night, to please have someone set up a massage bed in one of the cabanas. I went to my room to down a few Xanax, telling him I wanted to freshen up after dinner, but to meet me in his cabana in 20 minutes or so. I was ready to go, as he had said, 20 minutes later, with the effects of the tablets mixed with the red wine, and I would be free not to feel anything. He was still dressed when I got in the cabana, anxiously not accustomed to this, and a lot shyer than what I had been used to. I told him he'd need to undress and lie face down on the table, putting a towel to cover his bare bottom to prevent him from feeling embarrassed during the massage. I gave the massage my earnest, as I always had, and quickly got through having intercourse with him. Not wanting to make any foreplay or anything extravagant out of it, I let him think that's as good as it got, and by the smile on his face, I thought I had done enough. The next day, I took him down to the beach for a real massage under the tiki hut on the water's edge. It was one of Jeffrey's favorite places to have a massage, as he droned on about the sound of the waves and my gentle therapeutic strokes. Afterwards, we had lunch back in the main villa, and I went back to the beach to swim out to the water trampoline about 100 meters off the dock. He didn't do any bounding around or anything like that. It was just a good baseline for a rest spot after a long swim. What was really cool about it, though, was that you could see through the water and watch the fish swimming underneath. I asked him if he'd like another massage before I went to bed. He just wanted to stay up watching movies in Jeffrey's theater room. The next morning, we were both catching a flight from St. Thomas, and we had no time for anything other than breakfast and packing, which saved me from having to be too polite as we said our goodbyes from the terminal and the airport, both hurriedly off in separate directions. Thankfully, I arrived back in Palm Beach, only to be told to catch another flight the next day to New York City, where Jeffrey would fix me up the money he owed me for treating his colleague out to an entertaining weekend. That's the end of the quote. In her manuscript, Gouffre also describes sexual encounters with an MIT professor, several politicians, and businessmen. If she had had sex with me, she surely would have included me in this catalog of alleged criminals, especially since the journalist had told her that including me would help her pitch her book. But here's everything she wrote about me, and I quote, Alan Dershowitz, his colleague in finances, and his personal solicitor, a bird of the same feather, I had seen hanging around the island in Jeffrey's Manhattan mansion more and more these days. Alan's taste for the young and beautiful was a bias for a blooming business relationship between him and Jeffrey. After an explicit session of Jeffrey's vulgar pilgrimage into my body, we were interrupted by a knock on the door by Jeffrey's good friend, Alan. Opening the bedroom door and letting Alan inside, they began to converse about business immediately, right in front of me. Jeffrey started to tell Alan what needed to be done while he jostled some notes down quickly. I peeked my head from underneath the covers, thinking they were too wrapped up in their work to notice me get up and dress. And Jeffrey turned back to me and told me to just stay there, and it would take only a minute. Going back to Alan, he turned his focus back into work and hustled out a few more orders before letting Alan out of the door and returning his attention to me. End of the quote. Gouffre made up this entire story. My records prove I was never on the island during the time she knew Epstein. I had no business relationship with Epstein. This was years before I became his defense attorney, and was never in his bedroom. But the crucial point is that Gouffre did not make up a false claim she had sex with me, even when she was inventing a story about seeing me. This is especially striking since she said I had a taste for the young and the beautiful, and Churcher had said that we all suspect Alan is a pedo. If I had done anything that confirmed these false suspicions, Gouffre would surely have included it in her manuscript. Why would she write in detail about a sexual encounter with an obscure professor named Stephen, who no one had ever heard of, if she could help pitch her book by including a sexual encounter with a far more famous professor? This only plausible answer is that it never occurred to her to invent a sexual encounter with me that had never taken place until she felt pressured to include me by her lawyers. She only began to invent the false sex accusation against me after she met with lawyers and learned that she could profit from including me. Even then, she didn't want to name me because she knew it wasn't true, but she succumbed to the pressure from her lawyers and agreed to make up a story about me. She then essentially substituted me for Professor Stephen, whom she had described in the manuscript, and perhaps for others. To make her story consistent, she then had to testify that she had never had sex with Professor Stephen, despite having vividly described her days with him in the manuscript. She surely could not have forgotten spending so much time with her second client. This chronology is confirmed by what she told the FBI, what she told her former boyfriend, and her best friend before she was pressured by her lawyers, namely that I was not among the men she was accusing. It has also been confirmed by Sharon Churcher, the first journalist to interview Gouffre back in 2011. In Churcher's numerous interviews, Gouffre never included me in the laundry list of men with whom she said she had sex. That's why Churcher wrote that there was no proof that I did anything wrong. Churcher has now said that she doesn't believe Gouffre's accusations against me and that I am a victim of a false accusation influenced by Gouffre's lawyers and or money. Gouffre has now come up with another lie to explain why these damning emails and manuscripts do not prove that she made up the entire story about having sex with me. She claims that her manuscript was intended to be a, quote, fictionalized account, a novel, rather than a factual account of what actually happened. This is utter nonsense, as proved by the indisputable fact that the account she provided to the FBI under penalty of lying to law enforcement officials precisely paralleled what she wrote in her manuscript. She also asked Churcher for actual names of people that J.E. sent me to. She then included the actual names of those she was accusing and did not include me. If the manuscript was intended to be fiction rather than fact, why would she risk defamation suits by naming those she was accusing? And if it was fiction, why was she willing to falsely accuse those who she named? Another lie by a woman who truly doesn't understand the difference between fiction and fact. Here then is the summary of how the Gouffre story evolved. 2011, Gouffre is interviewed by Churcher about her sexual encounter. She mentions numerous men, but not me. 2011, she had to be told by Churcher that I wrote Reversal of Fortune and I'm a famous man who would be a good name for your pitch. 2011, Churcher tells Gouffre, you probably met him hanging around with Epstein, though there's no proof he did anything wrong. 2012, manuscript. Gouffre says she saw me in Epstein's bedroom discussing business with Epstein, but not that she ever actually met me or had sex with me. 2013, Gouffre tells the FBI about the men with whom she said she had sex. She does not include me. She also tells James Figueroa, her then boyfriend, and Rebecca Boylan, her childhood friend, whom she met and had sex with, but does not include me. 2014, Gouffre meets her lawyers, who, she tells Rebecca Boylan, pressured her to include me among the people with whom she had sex. 2014, 2015. After meeting with her lawyers and feeling pressure from them, Gouffre suddenly remembers having sex with me 7 times between 2001 and 2002, when she was 18 and 19. She substitutes me for Professor Stephen in her new account, and then denies having sex with him, despite her vivid description of her sexual encounter with him in her manuscript. 2015 to 2019, her lawyers are well aware of this chronology and these facts when they submit perjured affidavits by her, falsely accusing me of having had sex with her. Chapter 5, Suitable for Framing. Why me? During my interviews with the media, I was frequently asked the following question: why would Gouffre accuse you if it wasn't true? What does she have to gain by accusing you? She had to know that you would fight back. I too was puzzled by these questions. As soon as I heard of the false accusation against me, I suspected that it was about money. Gouffre claimed in her filings that in addition to Prince Andrew and me, she had engaged in sex with numerous politicians, powerful business executives, foreign presidents, a well-known prime minister, and other world leaders. Ultimately, she named many of these individuals, but only in a sealed deposition. Even before her testimony was unsealed, my own investigation established that they included former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell, former cabinet member Bill Richardson, the late MIT professor Marvin Minsky, a wealthy hotel owner from the Pritzker family, billionaire Leslie Wexner, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and other well-known, respected, and wealthy figures. Why did she only name me and Prince Andrew in a public filing and the others in sealed filings? I soon began to suspect that I was being used as a stalking horse in a scheme to obtain money from at least some of these as yet publicly unnamed wealthy alleged abusers. I believe that the not so subtle threat message to these unnamed but privately accused individuals was that if they did not want to have happen to them what happened to me, namely to have their names spread all over the world as an accused pedophile, her silence could be bought for a price, just as her public accusations made to the Daily Mail against Prince Andrew, President Clinton, Vice President Gore, and his then wife Tipper had been bought for a price. As I later testified, I believed it was an encouragement to the unnamed individuals to, quote, pay money for their names not to be mentioned or revealed, end quote. I knew that I was not the likely target of the plot for several reasons. First, the target of blackmail from whom the money is sought isn't publicly revealed because it's the threat of public disclosure that is held over the head of the target. Second, anyone who knows me would know I would never pay a penny to buy the silence of a false accuser. And finally, nobody had asked me for money. This has since changed. It seemed logical that the false accusation against me was being used to pressure someone else. At least that is what I believed, but I had no idea who it could be. I knew it had to be somebody wealthy who was acquainted with Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein had many rich friends, and it could be any or all of them. Then suddenly, out of the blue, I found out. Gouffre's longtime best friend, a woman named Rebecca Boylan, reached out to me through her husband. She was reluctant to become involved, but felt terrible about what was happening to me. She had just spent time with her friend Virginia after Virginia had been beaten up by her husband. They discussed me in some detail. Boylan told me that Gouffre had never previously mentioned me as one of the people with whom she claimed to have had sex, and that she didn't want to accuse me in the legal papers, but that she, quote, felt pressure, unquote, from her lawyers to include me. Boylan's husband confirmed that Gouffre had told them that I was not among the men with whom she had sex. Then Boylan told me who she believed the real target was. She didn't know his name, but she knew he was a wealthy businessman from Ohio who owned Limited Too and Victoria's Secret. I immediately knew she was referring to Leslie Wexner, who was a close friend and longtime business associate of Jeffrey Epstein. Boylan gave me permission to record our conversation, and this is what she told me, quote, she, Virginia, just said that he owned Victoria's Secret and Limited Too and that he had lots of money and was a billionaire. They wanted to sue him for at least half of his money. She made it sound that they were already telling him and that they were already, in the process of suing him. She also told me that when it came to Alan Dershowitz, that she did feel pressure to go after you. She felt pressured to do it. She didn't want to go after you, specifically that she felt pressured by her lawyers to do that. End of quote. Boylan also told me that, quote, Virginia never wanted to go after you, but she felt pressured by her lawyers. I never heard her mention you when we were kids or until very recently when things happened in the media, but I never heard her mention you before, end quote. I immediately called Leslie Wexner to inform him that he might be the target of a plot to threaten him with public exposure unless he paid money to buy Guthrie's silence. I reached his wife, Abigail, who confirmed that Guthrie's lawyers had been in touch with them about what she characterized as, quote, a shakedown, end quote. She referred me to her lawyer, John Ziegler. I called John Ziegler, who confirmed that Guthrie's lawyers had contacted him. He, too, used the word shakedown. Boyce had secretly reached out to Wexner at about the same time my name had been made public, and he later met with Ziegler. Boyce's co-counsel, Stanley Pottinger, has stated in an affidavit that Guthrie has asserted that Wexner, quote, had sex with one or more of Epstein girls, including Mrs. Guthrie. That's a quote. Ziegler told me that Boyce had informed him that his client, Virginia Roberts Guthrie, was accusing Wexner of having sex with her on multiple occasions while she was underage. The accusation was strikingly similar to the one made against me in terms of locations, frequency, and other details, but there was one significant difference. Guthrie was accusing Wexner of having made her dress up in baby doll lingerie of the kind sold by Victoria's Secret. If this accusation would have been made public, it would have a devastating impact on the company and on Wexner's leadership of it. Wexner's lawyers told Boyce that the accusations were absolutely false. They also noted that any claims were well beyond the statute of limitations that then governed, since they were alleged to have occurred nearly 15 years earlier. Why then would Boyce take time out of his very busy schedule to pursue a legal case that was barred by the statute of limitations, that had no chance of succeeding in a court of law? Boyce was a good enough lawyer to understand this. What then was his game plan when he spent hours meeting with Wexner's lawyers and describing in detail the accusations Guthrie was leveling against this multi-billionaire? Moreover, why did Guthrie's legal team accuse me in public court filings but make no mention of Wexner? Why did they decide to approach Wexner privately to discuss Guthrie's allegations against him, but to name Prince Andrew and me publicly? Was it true what Rebecca Boylan said, that Guthrie told her that she was seeking a megabuck payout from Wexner despite the fact that the statute of limitations barred any lawsuit? I don't know whether Virginia Guthrie's accusations that Leslie Wexner had sex with her on multiple occasions when she was underage is true or false, though I suspect it's false. Nor do I know whether her accusations against the other prominent wealthy friends and acquaintances of Epstein are true or false. All I know for certain is that she is lying about me and has a long sordid history of lying about other prominent men. I do not know whether David Boyce believes her accusations against Wexner to be true or false, but if Boyce believes them to be true, then why wasn't Wexner accused in public like I was? Why was he accused only in private? Why has he not been sued under the new statute of limitations that permits underage victims to sue for criminal acts that took place decades ago? If Boyce believes that Guthrie's very specific accusations against Wexner are false, as his co-counselor Bradley Edwards has acknowledged, how can he continue to maintain that her nearly identical allegations against me are true? How can he continue to represent someone who he believes made up a story about Wexner in an effort to obtain $1 billion from him? Why is he continuing to vouch for her credibility if he knows she has lied about Wexner and others? I leave it to the reader to answer these questions, or for Boyce to provide an explanation. Thus far, Boyce, who has been outspoken on many other issues, has refused to address these difficult questions about Wexner. Because one possible answer to these questions may suggest a criminal shakedown of Wexner, I took the matter to both federal and state prosecutors. I showed them the evidence, played the tapes, and laid out possible criminal scenarios. I relate what occurred in Chapter 11. Chapter 6, Being Exculpated. Prior to the advent of the Me Too movement in the fall of 2017, my case was closed. The judge had struck the false accusations as irrelevant and impertinent and had sanctioned the lawyers who had filed it. An independent investigation by the former director of the FBI, Louis Freeh, had concluded that the accusations were disproved. Here is the text of Freeh's conclusions. Over the past several months, an independent investigation was conducted under my supervision by former senior federal law enforcement officials. We interviewed many witnesses and reviewed thousands of pages of documentary evidence. Our investigation found no evidence to support the accusation of sexual misconduct against Professor Dershowitz. In fact, in several instances, the evidence directly contradicted the accusations made against him. In my opinion, the totality of the evidence found during the investigation refutes the allegations made against Professor Dershowitz. End quote. On March 9, 2019, the chief executive officer of the Freeh Group issued a supplementary statement detailing aspects of the investigation. It included the following. Quote, during the course of our investigation, personnel from our firm, including a former senior prosecutor and investigator from the U.S. Department of Justice, with more than a half-century of collective experience conducting criminal investigations, carefully examined thousands of pages of documentary evidence, much of which Professor Dershowitz supplied to us, sought to reconstruct events in New York City, Palm Beach, Little St. James Island, a ranch in New Mexico, on a private aircraft, and identified and interviewed many witnesses who were able to provide relevant details regarding Ms. Roberts' Gouffre's allegations. In our opinion, the totality of the evidence found during the investigation refutes the allegations made against Professor Dershowitz. In addition, the firm made a Freedom of Information Act request of the United States Secret Service for, quote, any and all travel records, itineraries, reports, other records for personnel traveling with former President William Clinton to Little St. James Island. This was done in an effort to determine whether former President Clinton had been there, as Ms. Roberts alleged. On January 16, 2016, the official in charge of the Secret Service office replied by letter that, quote, the United States Secret Service has conducted a reasonable search for responsive documents, and from a review of the main indices, there are no records pertaining to your request that are referenced in these indices. Thus, the conclusion that can be drawn, contrary to Ms. Roberts' allegations, is that former President Clinton did not in fact travel to, nor was he present on Little St. James between January 1st, 2002 and January 1st, 2003. The FOIA results not only directly impeach Ms. Roberts' specific allegations against Professor Dershowitz, but in our opinion, completely undermine her credibility. Together with our other factual findings and conclusions, it is our opinion that all of these allegations against him were made without any basis. At the conclusion of our investigation, which was conducted under the supervision of FGIS Chairman Louis J. Freeh, FGIS concluded that we found no evidence to support the accusations of sexual misconduct against Professor Dershowitz. In fact, in several instances, the evidence directly contradicted the accusations made against him. We stand by our investigation and that conclusion. My accuser's own lawyer had told me on tape that he had reviewed my travel and other records and had come to the conclusion that it would have been impossible for me to have been in the locations where Gouffre claimed to have had sex with me, and that she was wrong, simply wrong, in accusing me. The text of this admission is set out in Chapter 4. Finally, the lawyers who filed the pleadings accusing me of sexual misconduct acknowledged that it was a mistake to have done so and formally withdrew them. This is what Gouffre's lawyers agreed to say in a statement approved by all parties with regard to Gouffre's accusation. Quote, Dershowitz completely denies any such misconduct, while not disputing Roberts' statement that the underlying alleged misconduct may have occurred with someone else. Dershowitz has produced travel and other records for the relevant times, which he relies on to establish that he could not have been present when the alleged misconduct occurred. He has also produced other evidence that he relies on to refute the credibility of the allegations against him. The parties believe it is time to take advantage of this new information that has come to light on both sides during the litigation and put these matters behind them. Given the events that have been transpired since the filing of the documents in the federal court in this action, in which Dershowitz was accused of sexual misconduct, including the court order striking the allegations in the federal court filings and the records and other documents produced by the parties, Edwards and Cassell acknowledge that it was a mistake to have filed sexual misconduct accusations against Dershowitz, and the sexual misconduct allegations made in all public filings are thereby withdrawn. End of the quote. The lawyers later argued that the mistake to which they admitted was merely tactical, not substantive, but that's not what their binding agreement says, nor is it what was agreed to. Indeed, the explicit reference to my travel and other records for the relevant times and to the new information makes it clear that their mistake was substantive. They should not have falsely accused an innocent man of sexual misconduct. That is a far more reasonable interpretation of their statement. Now, it was a costly mistake for me because the false accusation, the recent fabrication, was published and transmitted all around the world, and false accusations simply can't be struck, withdrawn, or called a mistake. The original story containing the false accusations received far more coverage and attention than the subsequent stories about the evidence that proved my innocence and the withdrawal of the false accusation. The accusations against me were no longer in the news, but the stench lingered. Lawyers like to point out that when prejudicial evidence is presented to a jury and then struck by the judge, it's like, quote, throwing a skunk into the jury box. When the skunk is removed, the smell remains. It's impossible to describe what it feels like to be accused of a terrible crime with which you had absolutely nothing to do. It's not like some white-collar crimes such as fraud, which are often matters of degree, nor is it like an accusation of acquaintance rape in which sex occurred and there's a dispute whether it was consensual. In my case, there are no matters of degree, no gray areas. It was a completely made-up story motivated by money. I often wonder what it must feel like to the woman who willfully accuses an innocent person of a heinous sexual crime that she knows he didn't commit. It's hard to imagine any decent woman, even if she herself had been abused, putting an innocent person through such a horrible experience. Yet despite the absence of any evidence that I did anything wrong in the court of public opinion, as distinguished from the court of law, the burden of proof was on me to prove I had never met her, and it was a heavy burden. I had to prove a negative, and I had to prove it conclusively. Beyond a reasonable doubt would not be enough. There could be no lingering doubt, reasonable or unreasonable. I was prepared to meet that burden, despite the fact that my accuser refused to provide any time frame for her accusations beyond the 2-year period she knew Jeffrey Epstein. But she deliberately lied even about that broad time frame. Originally, she claimed that she had met Jeffrey Epstein in June of 1998, when she was 14, distinctively recalling spending her sweet 16 birthday with Epstein. She said she met Epstein's friend Ghislaine Maxwell while she was working at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, and that she got the job there after her father had worked there for a while. But the employment records of Mar-a-Lago proved conclusively that her father did not begin to work there until Gouffre was nearly 17, and that she almost certainly met Jeffrey Epstein when she was well past 17, not 14, as she had falsely claimed. According to her own account, she did not begin to have sex with any of Jeffrey's associates until about 2 years after meeting Epstein, which would have put her well above 18 when she claimed to have had her first sexual encounter with an Epstein acquaintance, and close to 19 when she had subsequent encounters. The reason she lied so dramatically about her age is because the age of consent is 17 in most of the places she claimed to have had sex with Jeffrey Epstein's friends. If she was over 17 and was paid to have sex, she said she was paid $15,000 to have sex with Prince Andrew, it was she who was committing a crime. Her age was, of course, irrelevant to me since I never had sex with her at any age, but it proves that she deliberately lied about her age as she had about Al Gore, Tipper Gore, and Bill Clinton. Even after it was proved conclusively that she had committed numerous acts of perjury, she remained a free woman, unpunished for repeatedly lying under oath and deliberately seeking to destroy the reputation of an innocent victim of a financially motivated frame-up. Nor was I the only victim of her perjury. Every real victim of sexual assault suffers when a false victim is caught in a lie, as Gouffre has been. In a court filing, I issued the following invitation to prosecutors. Quote, I never had a sexual contact with Ms. Gouffre of any kind. By swearing to this, I have deliberately exposed myself to a perjury prosecution and disbarment if I am not telling the truth. If Ms. Gouffre were to submit an affidavit repeating her false accusations against me, which she subsequently did, I would welcome and cooperate with a criminal investigation by any prosecutorial office as to whether it is Ms. Gouffre or I who is committing perjury. It is inescapably clear that one of us is lying under oath. I know it's not me, end quote. I believe that failing to prosecute perjury by adult women, she was over 30 when she first committed perjury about me, and she is 36 now, who falsely and willfully accuse men of heinous sex crimes for money, constitutes an unacceptable double standard in a society seeking to move toward gender equality under the law. I am committed to seeing the law change so that no other innocent person should have to endure being falsely accused of a crime without having recourse under the rule of law. Currently, lawyers, clients, and witnesses can make defamatory statements in public court filings and depositions without fear of a civil suit or perjury prosecution. As Judge Cabranes put it in a recent decision, quote, it is in fact exceedingly rare for anyone to be prosecuted for perjury in a civil proceeding, end quote. It is these realities that incentivize Gouffre and her lawyers to falsely accuse me of a crime with complete impunity. They believe that I could not sue them because their allegations were contained in court filings and were thus immune from a defamation suit. Even more absurdly, by denying Gouffre's accusations and saying there were lies, I subjected myself to a defamation suit. More on this later. Having won my case in the court of public opinion, at least until the Me Too movement resuscitated it, I drew some lessons and proposed some remedies. I quote, academics have long complained that the absolute litigation privilege puts victims of defamation in an unfair position. Courts have generally responded that the truth-finding mission of judicial proceedings outweighs any individual interest in reputational integrity. So what's to be done? There are two principal avenues through which this Kafkaesque situation in which I found myself could be avoided in the future. Lawyers should be disciplined for filing false allegations without performing adequate due diligence. Victims of a defamatory accusation made within the scope of the litigation privilege must be allowed to deny the accusation in the strongest terms without fear of a defamation suit. Under current law, the marketplace of ideas is skewed in favor of the false accuser and against the falsely accused victim. Courts must level the playing field between the accused and the accuser by granting reciprocal immunity from defamation to persons being falsely accused so that they are able to fully defend themselves in the court of public opinion. There are no perfect solutions in a nation rightly committed both to the role of courts in resolving disputes and to the protection of free expression. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with decent lawyers to refuse to level unfounded allegations against innocent individuals. I leave it to the reader to decide whether Virginia Gouffre's lawyers satisfied that responsibility. End of the quote. My proposal stimulated some debate, but then along came the Me Too movement, which stifled debate, shifted the presumption from innocence to guilt, and made it nearly impossible for a man falsely accused of a sex crime to prove his innocence, regardless of the evidence or lack thereof. Chapter 7, the hashtag Me Too movement, virtues, vices, and suggested improvements. The Me Too movement began with a series of media exposés of Harvey Weinstein. I had represented Weinstein's company with regard to First Amendment issues in his early years as a film producer. I helped his film secure appropriate ratings from the Motion Picture Association of America. When he was recently indicted, his lawyers sought my legal advice about obtaining exculpatory emails from his accusers. I had been litigating to obtain the exculpatory emails from my own case, so I shared my experience and expertise with his lawyers. Ironically, David Boies had been Weinstein's original lawyer, trying to stop the media from reporting about this alleged harassment. But when the New York Times, whom he had also been representing, discovered that Boies had hired an investigating firm to intimidate Times reporters who were covering Weinstein, the Times fired him and he stopped representing Weinstein. The Weinstein expose led other women to come forward against prominent men, and the Me Too movement was born. The philosopher Eric Hoffa once described the evolution or devolution of movements as follows, quote, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket, end quote. Only time will tell whether this becomes the fate of the Me Too movement. One thing is already clear. Some unscrupulous lawyers are trying to exploit the Me Too movement for personal profit by helping women file false or exaggerated accusations against innocent men. If this tactic is allowed to succeed, if there are no consequences for leveling knowingly false accusations, it will spread and become a racket. A corollary to Hoffa's cynical if prescient assessment is the historical truth that some movements and causes are driven by an ends justify the means mentality. Some zealots who push these movements and causes are so convinced of their righteousness that they become intolerant of dissent, due process, and other cumbersome barriers to their truth, with a capital T, a truth of which they are absolutely certain. For them, procedural safeguards such as presumption of innocence, the requirement that the accuser prove her case by evidence, due process, are unnecessary when a woman accuses a man of sexual assault. But as Justice Frankfurter once reminded us, quote, the history of liberty has largely been a history of observance of procedural safeguards, end quote. We are already seeing decreasing respect for such safeguards within the Me Too movement. For some in that movement, an accusation by a woman is enough to establish guilt because women don't lie and women must be believed about being sexually assaulted. The point these advocates are making is that women who say they were sexually assaulted have been routinely disbelieved over the years, and the time has come, indeed it's long overdue, when the presumption should shift from disbelief to belief. There is much to be said for this view, but it must not deny the falsely accused the right to prove his innocence. There is no gender-linked gene for truth-telling or lying. Consider, for example, Meghan McCain's demand that I be banned from TV because I was accused by Goofrey. I will discuss this demand at greater length in Chapter 10, but for now it's enough to note that both Goofrey and I have been accused of serious crimes. I was accused by Goofrey of having sex with her, and she is accused by me of committing perjury and falsely accusing me. My evidence is far stronger than hers. Indeed, she has no evidence. Yet McCain would not demand that she be banned from TV because she has been accused. To the contrary, she would be welcomed by McCain on her show, as she has been on others. Moreover, women victims may be telling the truth about some aspects of their victimization and lying about other aspects. That may well be the situation with Goofrey, a person who at a young age has been repeatedly abused, as Goofrey apparently had been even before she met Epstein. She may develop coping mechanisms for surviving abuse. These mechanisms include lying and stealing, both of which Goofrey has been caught doing. This doesn't mean she wasn't herself a victim of someone else's abuse, but it may mean that she has victimized others as well through her abusive dishonesty. Goofrey may well be telling the truth about having been victimized by Epstein, but she is lying about me. I don't know whether she's telling the truth about others, but there is a Latin legal principle that says falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus, false in one thing, false in everything. This may well overstate the reality because some people can be telling the truth about certain matters and lying about others. But judges do and should instruct juries to view with skepticism, some say distrust, the testimony of witnesses who have a proven record of lying. The same should be true in the court of public opinion. In general, the testimony of one witness is sufficient to make a legal case, even if it's uncorroborated. But when that witness has a history of lying, especially about related issues or people, some degree of corroboration should be demanded before their accusations are credited, especially if serious consequences flow from believing him or her. That makes common sense and is consistent with fairness and due process. Yet in the era of Me Too, that common sense approach is often not followed when it comes to accusations of sexual misconduct by a woman against a man. In my case, Goofrey has falsely accused other prominent men for money. She has lied about how old she was when she met Epstein. She was caught stealing money from a business for which she had worked. She is lying about her nonfiction manuscript being a novel. Yet her uncorroborated accusation against me has been credited by some in the Me Too movement and the media, despite the overwhelming evidence that she is lying. The Me Too movement must not become hostage to those who seek to exploit it and turn it into a racket. It must distinguish between true victims of sex abuse, false victims, and those who may have elements of both. It must become more nuanced in its assessment of accusations. If the mantra that all women always tell the truth and that all women should always be believed were to become widely accepted, it would simply substitute one form of sexism for another. In the past, too many women were disbelieved just because they were women. The Me Too movement rightfully challenged that overgeneral stereotype. But the other overgeneral stereotype, that no woman should ever be disbelieved, must be challenged as well. The Me Too movement began as an understandable reaction against the sexism of allowing predatory men to get away with abusing women. It should not be allowed to be distorted into an overreaction that allows greedy women and their lawyers to turn innocent men into victims of deliberately false accusations. Despite the sordid history of women not being believed, there is no place for affirmative action when accusations of sexual abuse are disputed. Women and men should be treated equally when it comes to credibility. The presumption of innocence should be applied to both genders, and the burden of proof should fall on accusers, regardless of their gender. The burden should, of course, be higher in criminal than in civil cases, but no one should be presumed guilty or liable without convincing evidence. The noble ends of gender equality must not be allowed to justify the elimination of due process as a reliable means for assessing serious accusations of sexual misconduct. David Boies and his legal team have not only hurt the Me Too movement, they have hurt their own client by having her submit perjured affidavits about me. She may well be telling the truth about Epstein and others, but her general credibility as a witness has been shattered by her proven lies about me. Ironically, Boies told me he thought it was a mistake to have Goofrey accuse me, and that her account regarding Epstein and others would have been far more credible had she not included me. Boies knows that I never met Goofrey and has admitted in a recorded conversation that she was simply wrong in accusing me, because it would have been impossible for me to have been in the places she claims to have met me. Goofrey's provably false statements make it impossible for ethical government lawyers, or for any lawyers, now to vouch for her credibility. Had she not falsely accused me, her credibility might be intact. For reporters to rely on the credibility of witnesses with a proven record of perjury, as the Miami Herald, the New Yorker, NBC's Dateline, and others have done, diminishes the general credibility of their reporting. False witnesses also hurt the Me Too movement by casting doubt on the credibility of truthful witnesses and victims. Boies is not a hero of the Me Too movement, despite his crass efforts to anoint himself as such. He is a villain who has hurt innocent people, damaged the positive movement, and most shamefully diminished the credibility of his own clients, all for self-serving and self-enriching purposes. There's an important difference between a criminal defense lawyer who must defend his client even if he knows his client is guilty, and a civil plaintiff's lawyer who must never bring a lawsuit charging a defendant with serious misconduct if he knows the defendant is innocent. Even a criminal defense lawyer may not call the defendant or any other witness to the stand if the lawyer knows the witness will lie. The noble ends of the Me Too movement do not justify the ignoble means of allowing clients to falsely accuse an innocent man. The Me Too movement will be judged by history and not just by the passion of the moment. For it to be remembered as a positive movement rather than as a business and racket, it must not allow those who would wrongly exploit it for personal profit to hide behind its virtuous shield, turning it into an exploitive sword against innocent people. Chapter 8, a pattern of perjury suborned. In sexual assault cases, prosecutors often seek to introduce evidence that the accused rapist had a pattern of prior assaults that gives credence to the accusation for which he is standing trial. Such a pattern constitutes powerful corroboration for an alleged victim's testimony. In Bill Cosby's first trial, prosecutors failed to introduce pattern evidence. The result was a hung jury. The second trial, They introduced the testimony of other women who said they were drugged before being raped. The jury then convicted. In the Weinstein case, the prosecutor, of a strong objection by the defense, is being permitted to introduce pattern evidence. But there is another side of the coin with regard to pattern evidence. Sometimes there is a pattern of perjury or of subornation of perjury for financial gain. In my case, after I proved that Gouffre was lying, her lawyers got two other women to follow her pattern. David Boies had threatened to find, quote, another girl to accuse me unless I withdrew disciplinary charges I had filed against him with the bar associations. As he told my source, two are better than one. The person told me that Boies was trolling for another woman to accuse me. I refused to withdraw the charges, and he found a 30-something-year-old woman named Sarah Ransom who was willing to say that she had participated in a threesome with me when she was 22 years old and working with Epstein. As with Gouffre, I had never met or heard of this liar. She too had made up the story after meeting with and presumably being pressured by the same lawyer or lawyers who had pressured Gouffre to lie about me. The pattern was beginning to become obvious. But this woman was even a bigger liar, which she eventually admitted, than Gouffre. In the run-up to the 2016 presidential election, Ransom wrote dozens of emails to a reporter for the New York Post claiming that she possessed sex tapes of Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and Richard Branson. She also claimed to have been targeted for assassination by Hillary Clinton and the CIA, and that she was working with Russian KGB to prevent the election of the two pedophiles who were then running for president. The New York Post reporter asked her for proof of what she was saying, but the woman had none. So the reporter told me that she concluded that Ransom was either hallucinating or lying and refused to publish her claims, even on the gossipy page 6. But what wasn't credible enough at page 6 was apparently credible enough for David Boies, who vouched for Ransom's truthfulness by filing her affidavit falsely accusing me. It's a sad sign of the times that the New York Post reporters refused to publish these emails, which she and the Post are free to do. They, like other media, refuse to disclose negative factual information about alleged Me Too victims if such information would undercut the politically correct but often factually incorrect narrative of victimization. In her emails, Ransom, like Gouffre, mentioned me. And like Gouffre, she mentioned me as someone she did not have sex with. She claimed quite absurdly that I had been her lawyer and was suing a man who she met on Sugar Daddy website, where young women express a willingness to exchange sex with wealthy men for money. Of course, she had no evidence, no retainer agreement, no court documents, no letters, no witnesses, or anything else to support her absurd claim, because I had never met her and was certainly never her lawyer. But that isn't the important point. What is critical is that the story she made up about me before meeting her lawyers was that I was a lawyer, not her sex partner. She concocted the phony sex story about me only after she met her greedy lawyers, who were well aware that she had previously made up false stories about the sex tape and in the Clinton assassination plot. When I published Ransom's many lies, she was forced to admit to a journalist that she had invented the story and the sex tapes in order to take revenge against Epstein and prevent him from harming her. She did not say why she invented the story about me, but the obvious reason is that it was part of a pattern of being pressured by the same lawyer or lawyers who had pressured Gouffre into falsely accusing me. Perhaps two nearly identical instances of lying as a result of being pressured by the same lawyers does not constitute a pattern, but three certainly does, and there is indeed a third component of the pattern. A woman named Maria Farmer worked for Epstein in his New York home until the early summer of 1996, when she claims he assaulted her on Leslie Wexner's property in New Albany, Ohio.
Okay, guys, the numbers are going really, really low now. It's a lot of people leaving. So I guess you guys are tired and we can continue tomorrow. What I did do, guys, I reached out to Mr. Dershowitz and seen if he could possibly be here as a guest of ours. So cross your fingers and hopefully he will say yes. And because it would be great for him to come here and answer some of our questions in regards to Robert's case, hopefully. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you guys for your time. I will be back on tomorrow with the rest. We got roughly about an hour and 23 more minutes worth of this book left, okay? You said, oh, heck, oh, Elizabeth, you still listen? You want to continue? I just thought maybe everybody was bored because so many people leaving. Oh, Elizabeth and Phoenix is still here. Do y'all want me to go ahead and continue this, or should I not? But I did send him an email, and also I'm gonna make a phone call to him tomorrow, see if he can be our guest. Because he doesn't seem like, let's do it tomorrow. Okay, Phoenix, we'll continue tomorrow. What time would you guys like to? Because in the morning I'm gonna make those phone calls to him. Hey, Nikki is here too. I'm gonna make the phone calls to him because I think it would be perfect to have someone like that to come and just give us some insight, of what we can do. Oh yeah, and what's happening with Robert and things like that. What I'll do, I did email him. Hopefully I get an email back. If I don't, I am going to call tomorrow to him. I've got a couple of phone numbers to reach him by. I got 2 phone numbers to reach him. Hopefully he'll say yes. Guys, keep your fingers crossed. Pray, do whatever you need to do so we can get someone like that on our platform. Hopefully that would be awesome. Let's hope and pray that God would give us favor, because we believe in God to give us favor into someone like that answering our questions. But I'm gonna do my due diligence tomorrow. I emailed him already, and I'm gonna do a couple of calls, and I'm going to keep reaching out to people that would help us. Okay. All right. So I'm going to let my students go for the day. Me and my teacher's hat. I got to take it off now. And if he does come, I'm believing he is. Guys, I want you guys to have your questions ready, okay? Because I think and one question I'm going to ask him, since he's in contact with Trump, I'm going to ask him, can Trump actually help Robert out, and how do we reach him? That type of thing. So let's do that, okay? I'm gonna, me, I'm the type of person gonna bug you. So I'm gonna contact him several times. Even if I have to leave a message 1,000 times, I'm believing I'm gonna get to him. All right. So I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and we shall continue the rest of the book tomorrow. Let's do it about 3:00. No. Let's do it the same time, 6:00 tomorrow. 6:00 tomorrow evening, we'll get back into the book where we left off. We're leaving off with the woman, Maria. So that's where we're going to be living. Just take notes that we're going to be left with Maria, okay? The $1 million question, can this new statute be appealed? Yeah, that is a good question, and we're gonna ask him questions in regards to the new statute. We can ask him questions about the case as far as things like double jeopardy. Whatever question you guys want to ask, let's get some questions in your minds, and then we can directed towards Robert's case, okay? Because I know he is aware of Robert's case. And we're going to just ask questions, okay? Just ask a question, interview him, all right? So I'll see you guys tomorrow evening so we can finish the book, because I did tell him that we have a book club, and we've been reading his book, listening to his book. So, I want to push it over, and I said, can we have an opportunity to interview him? Yeah, definitely. We need him, Elizabeth. But anyway, guys, I must go. It's only 13. People just dropping off. But I'll see you guys tomorrow, okay? Love you guys. Bye.